90% of top performers have something in common that has nothing to do with IQ. And what's crazy is that most people completely ignore it. This invisible skill influences 58% of job performance and separates those who thrive from those who struggle. The difference? Emotional intelligence. But here's what most people miss. Everyone talks about emotional intelligence like it's some mysterious superpower. But what do people with high EQ actually do differently every single day? Research from 2024 shows that only 36% of people worldwide are emotionally intelligent. That means the other 64% are missing out on a skill that matters more than raw intelligence when it comes to success. According to studies published in recent years, job success is only 20% dependent on IQ, but 80% dependent on EQ. Think about that for a second. The thing schools barely teach us is 4 times more important than the thing they spend years testing us on. But emotional intelligence isn't just about being nice or getting along with people. When scientists studied over 1 million people through the TalentSmart EQ research database, they found specific patterns. People with high emotional intelligence do certain things consistently, almost like they're following a playbook the rest of us don't have access to. So, let's break down exactly what that playbook looks like. Number 1. They pause before reacting. Here's something most people do wrong. Someone says something that irritates them, and boom, they fire back immediately. Their emotions are in the driver's seat, and their mouth becomes a weapon before their brain even gets a chance to process what's happening. People with high EQ do the complete opposite. They've mastered what psychologists call self-regulation, which basically means they can hit pause on their automatic reactions. A 2021 study published in the International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health found that emotional intelligence directly correlates with the ability to manage impulses and control behaviors in healthy ways. Think of it like this. When something happens that triggers an emotional response, most people are like a match getting struck. The flame appears instantly. But someone with high emotional intelligence? They've got a buffer between the strike and the flame. They feel the emotion, they recognize it, but they don't let it control what happens next. This shows up in everyday situations. Someone cuts them off in traffic, and instead of laying on the horn and losing their cool, they take a breath and think about whether that reaction actually helps anything. A coworker makes a passive-aggressive comment during a meeting, and instead of snapping back, they process what's really going on. Maybe that coworker is stressed about something else entirely. Maybe they're dealing with their own issues. The science backs this up too. Research from 2024 shows that people who can pause and regulate their emotions perform 40% better in decision-making. They're not making choices based on temporary feelings that will pass in an hour. They're thinking clearly about what actually matters. And here's the thing that makes this so powerful. When someone stays calm while everyone around them is losing it, they become the person others look to for guidance. According to workplace studies, 72% of employees say respectful treatment is their top factor for job satisfaction. That calm, measured response creates respect automatically. The key is recognizing that emotions are information, not instructions. Feeling angry doesn't mean an action needs to be taken immediately. Feeling anxious doesn't mean the worst-case scenario is about to happen. People with high EQ have learned to observe their emotions like weather patterns passing through, rather than commands they must obey. Number 2, they actually listen to what's not being said. Most conversations are just two people waiting for their turn to talk. Someone tells a story, and the other person is already thinking about their own related story they want to share. That's not listening. That's just taking turns broadcasting. People with high emotional intelligence listen at a completely different level. They're not just hearing words, they're picking up on tone, body language, what's being avoided, and the emotions hiding underneath the surface. A 2023 research paper on emotional intelligence highlighted that this social awareness, the ability to understand other people's emotions and needs, is one of the core traits that separates high EQ individuals from everyone else. Here's an example. Someone says everything is fine, but their voice is tight and they're avoiding eye contact. Most people accept the words at face value and move on. Someone with high EQ notices the disconnect. They ask a follow-up question gently, creating space for the real conversation to happen. They might say something like, "Are you sure? Because I'm getting the sense that something might be bothering you." This ability to read between the lines comes from genuine curiosity about other people. Studies show that emotionally intelligent people are naturally curious about everyone around them. This curiosity is actually a product of empathy. The more someone cares about what another person is going through, the more they pay attention to the subtle signals most people miss. And this doesn't just apply to negative emotions. People with high EQ are also tuned into when someone is excited, but trying to play it cool, or when someone needs encouragement but won't ask for it directly. They pick up on the unspoken request for validation or support. The research is clear on why this matters. According to workplace studies, employees with empathetic leaders report a 76% increase in engagement and a 61% increase in creativity. When people feel truly heard and understood, they show up differently, they contribute more, they trust more. But here's what makes this skill really interesting. Most people think they're good listeners. They're not interrupting, they're maintaining eye contact, they're nodding along. But that's just surface level listening. Deep listening means shutting down the internal monologue about what to say next and genuinely being present with what's happening in front of them. People with high emotional intelligence have trained themselves to quiet their own thoughts and really tune into another person. They're not just waiting for their turn. They're actually invested in understanding the full picture of what someone is communicating, verbal and nonverbal. Number 3, they turn mistakes into learning, not shame. Failure is a normal part of being human. Everyone messes up. Everyone makes bad calls. Everyone has moments they wish they could take back. The difference is in how people process those moments afterward. Most people do one of two things when they fail. They either beat themselves up endlessly, replaying the mistake over and over until it becomes part of their identity. Or they deflect, blame external circumstances, and refuse to take responsibility. Both approaches keep them stuck. People with high EQ take a third path. They view mistakes as data. A 2021 meta-analysis examining emotional intelligence found that people with higher EQ demonstrate greater emotional resilience, which is the ability to recover from setbacks and manage negative emotional experiences productively. When something goes wrong, instead of spiraling into shame or defensiveness, they ask themselves useful questions. What led to this outcome? What can be learned here? What would a better approach look like next time? They're treating the failure like a teacher instead of a judge. This connects to something called self-awareness, which is a core component of emotional intelligence. Research shows that people with high self-awareness can accurately perceive their own emotions and understand how those emotions affect their thoughts and behaviors. They recognize their strengths, but they also acknowledge their limitations without getting defensive about them. In practice, this looks like someone making a presentation that doesn't go well, and instead of spending the next week convinced they're terrible at presenting, they review what happened objectively. Maybe they didn't prepare enough examples. Maybe they rushed through the most important part. Maybe they didn't read the room correctly. Each of these is fixable information, not a character flaw. According to research, this ability to learn from failure without letting it destroy confidence is one of the reasons why 90% of top performers have high emotional intelligence. They're not stuck in loops of self-criticism or denial. They're constantly evolving based on real feedback, including feedback from their own mistakes. And here's what's interesting. When leaders model this approach, admitting mistakes and showing how they learned from them, it creates a ripple effect. Studies show that employees who see their leaders handle failure constructively are more likely to take smart risks and innovate because they're not paralyzed by fear of getting it wrong. The key is separating what happened from who they are as a person. A mistake is an event, not an identity. This psychological distinction allows people with high EQ to move forward instead of staying trapped in shame or defensiveness. Number 4, they set boundaries without burning bridges. Here's a skill most people never learn: how to say no or establish a limit without destroying a relationship in the process. A lot of people swing between two extremes. Either they're people pleasers who can't set any boundaries and end up exhausted and resentful, or they're so rigid with their boundaries that they come across as harsh and unapproachable. People with high emotional intelligence have figured out the middle path. They balance empathy and kindness with the ability to assert themselves, Research on emotional intelligence habits shows that cultivating assertiveness is one of the most important traits for both professional and personal success. The way they do this is through clear, calm communication that respects both their own needs and the other person's feelings. Let's say someone asks them to take on extra work when they're already at capacity. Instead of saying yes and overloading themselves or snapping at the person for even asking, they might say something like, "I really appreciate you thinking of me for this, but I'm at my limit right now with current projects. Can we look at timelines, or is there someone else who might be able to help?" Notice what's happening there. They're acknowledging the request, they're being honest about their capacity, and they're offering alternatives. The other person doesn't feel rejected or attacked. The boundary is clear, but the relationship stays intact. This ability to handle conflict tactfully is a hallmark of high EQ. According to studies, when most people face conflict, they default to either passive or aggressive behavior. But emotionally intelligent people stay balanced and assertive. They steer away from unfiltered emotional reactions, which enables them to neutralize difficult situations without creating enemies. The same principle applies to personal relationships. If a friend keeps canceling plans last minute, someone with low EQ might either keep accepting it while building resentment or explode one day and end the friendship. Someone with high EQ addresses it directly but kindly. They might say, "Hey, I've noticed our plans have been canceled a few times recently, and it's left me feeling like maybe we're not on the same page about making time for each other. Is everything okay on your end?" That approach opens a real conversation instead of shutting one down. Maybe the friend is going through something difficult and doesn't know how to talk about it. Maybe they didn't realize the pattern was bothering anyone. Either way, the boundary is communicated, but the door stays open. Research shows that this skill of relationship management, being able to communicate clearly, inspire others, and manage conflict, is one of the 4 core competencies of emotional intelligence. And it's directly tied to career success. Studies indicate that 52% of companies now offer senior management roles based specifically on candidates' emotional intelligence skills, because they know these leaders won't just make good decisions, they'll maintain strong teams while doing it. Number 5, they focus their energy on what they can control. Walk into any office, scroll through any social media feed, spend 5 minutes watching the news, and it's easy to feel overwhelmed. There's always something to worry about. Economic uncertainty, political tension, global crises, workplace drama, personal setbacks. The list is endless. Most people get caught up in all of it. They spend hours thinking about things completely outside their control, which leaves them feeling anxious, powerless, and exhausted. It's like pouring energy into a bucket with no bottom. People with high emotional intelligence take a different approach. They've learned to focus their attention and effort on the 2 things completely within their power: where they direct their focus and how they choose to respond. This is one of the key habits identified in research studying over 1 million people through emotional intelligence assessments. When faced with a situation they can't change, whether it's a difficult coworker, an economic downturn, or a personal disappointment, they ask themselves a simple question: what part of this can I actually influence? Then they put their energy there and let the rest go. For example, they can't control whether their company is going through layoffs, but they can control how they prepare by updating their resume, expanding their network, and managing their finances wisely. They can't control if someone is rude to them, but they can control whether they let that interaction ruin their day or whether they choose to move on. This isn't about being passive or pretending problems don't exist. It's about strategic energy management. According to psychological research, rumination, which is the act of obsessively thinking about things outside our control, is linked to increased anxiety, sleep problems, and even cardiovascular issues. People with high EQ have learned to interrupt those unproductive thought spirals. A 2024 study on emotional intelligence and workplace well-being found that this ability to manage stress and focus on actionable steps is what allows emotionally intelligent people to maintain resilience in challenging environments. While everyone else is drowning in worry about what might happen, they're taking concrete steps based on what they can actually affect. This also shows up in how they handle feedback and criticism. They can't control what someone else thinks of them, but they can control whether they use that feedback to improve or whether they dismiss it entirely. They sort through criticism for the useful parts, implement changes where it makes sense, and let go of the rest without taking it personally. The workplace data supports this too. Research shows that emotional intelligence helps people buffer stress and maintain well-being in volatile conditions, which leads to adaptive performance in complex work environments. When everything around them is chaotic, they're the steady presence focusing on solutions instead of spiraling into panic. And here's the most important part of this habit. By consistently directing their energy toward what they can control, people with high EQ build a sense of agency. They prove to themselves over and over that they can influence outcomes through their choices. That builds confidence and resilience in a way that worrying never could. So here's the truth most people miss. Emotional intelligence isn't something you're born with. It's something anyone can develop through consistent practice of these 5 behaviors. People with high EQ pause before reacting. They listen to what's not being said. They turn mistakes into learning. They set boundaries without burning bridges, and they focus on what they can control. Each of these habits is trainable. Each one gets stronger with practice. The research is clear, with 90% of top performers having high emotional intelligence, and with studies showing that EQ accounts for 58% of job performance across all types of roles. This isn't some nice-to-have skill. This is the skill that determines whether someone just survives or actually thrives. And the best part, unlike IQ, which is relatively fixed after childhood, emotional intelligence is malleable throughout a person's entire life. The brain builds new pathways every time these behaviors are practiced. Over time, they become automatic. What once took conscious effort starts happening naturally. Anyone can start today by picking just one of these 5 habits and practicing it deliberately for the next week. Pause before reacting to something that normally triggers an immediate response. Really listen to someone without planning a response. Learn from a mistake instead of beating oneself up about it. Set one boundary clearly and kindly. Redirect energy from worry to action on something controllable. Small, consistent changes create big results. That's how emotional intelligence grows. And that's how the gap closes between where someone is now and where top performers operate every single day. If this helped, subscribe for more psychology insights that actually work.